Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited. This is a very spontaneous event, so thank you for those who are showing up at the very last minute. What an honor, Jennifer, to have you. First, before I'll go ahead and just introduce. My name is Laura Barr. I'm the owner and founder of Emerging Educational Consulting. We provide one-to-one mentorship from the beginning to end of the college application process. I wake up every day to help grow good humans and to use the college application process as a way to do that. And what better way to do that than to provide education to impact and transform? Jennifer, I got giddy. I couldn't even do my introduction because you were so nice to do this at the last minute. You're getting ready to go out of town for 2 weeks and you said, I will do this on Friday at 11. And I didn't have enough time to get our whole community with us, but I knew that we'd be able to put this out. You and I also talked about that there's a little bit of a sound issue, maybe internet, but I said I didn't care because your time is so valuable. Jennifer, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself in the context of the topic, which is across the pond, reasons why you might want to study in the UK or Ireland. So jump in, introduce yourself, and then let's get going with the tons of questions I have from the community.
Okay, well, I'm really excited to be here too, Laura. Thank you for reaching out to me. Like you, I get up every day hoping to help my students and help them both with university and career. And as you know, I work with students mainly in Europe. I started as an international student counselor and independent educational consultant, as we call it in the US, about 18 years ago with my partner, Ann Spencer. And we work with students who are applying to universities in North America, Canada, and the US, and also to the UK and European institutions. Sometimes we even go a little bit further than that, students going to Australia or Hong Kong, Singapore, a little bit in the Middle East as well, Israel, Dubai, different countries. So it's always exciting to learn about new countries, but I am a specialist when it comes to the UK and certainly Europe and the US. So today we're going to be talking about the UK and Ireland. And the UK, as a lot of you know, is composed of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And Ireland is another country, but we'll just lump that all together as UK plus Ireland. So a little bit about me. As I said, I started counseling students about in 2008. And I lived in Switzerland at the time, in Geneva. I raised my 3 children in London and Geneva, and now they're all adults, out of college, out of grad school in 2 cases. And so I know what it's like to live abroad. And as a US citizen, I did grow up in the United States, but also wanted to mention that I did study abroad starting in high school. And then I did a year at the University of Provence when I was an undergrad at Wellesley College, and did my master's degree at the London School of Economics, which some of you might be familiar with. That's Social Sciences University in the UK. So that's me. Let's get the ball rolling. What's your first question, Laura?
I think context why I felt such a pressing need to reach out to you is that what I'm finding, and I think a lot of IECs and college counselors are finding, is that there has become a huge interest for students who want to study in the UK. And I think we can all imagine that that's partly because a lot of these students don't speak multiple languages like Europeans do. And so the UK feels like a safe place to dive into. I think there's the selectivity in our country has become outrageous. And people want to have access to different kinds of experiences than just, the big public party schools kind of thing. And they want to be exposed to this kind of international experience. So, I think the very first question is, how do UK degree structures differ from US degrees? Like, let's start there, and then we can just piggyback off of that.
That is a great question. And you're right, there is increasing demand coming from the US for universities abroad, particularly in the UK. And starting with that, I'd say the biggest difference between US and UK degree programs is a little bit bigger picture, if I may. Universities in the UK, for the most part, are public universities. And this is our starting point, because you have to remember public universities, we have state universities in the US. It's a little bit similar to that, but I would say that for the most part, they are public institutions. So the setup is completely different in terms of how you apply, but also in terms of the structure of degrees. Also, the structure of the degrees is based on the British system in some respects of what the expectations are in high school. So high school students in the UK will typically do what are called A levels. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because they are specializing in, usually they're taking 3 subjects only for the last 2 years of their high school diploma. So, for example, if you're interested in a course in the sciences, a bachelor's degree in the sciences, you in high school might not be doing English, history, other social sciences in your last 2 years. You might be doing math, biology, and chemistry, and that's it. So you are fully prepared then to enter into that bachelor's degree with that experience of having taken those courses that are specifically aimed at that bachelor's degree. And so what does that mean for a US student who's applying to a UK university? Well, they're going to be choosing a course of study. So you're not just saying, oh, I like the look of St. Andrews University, or I like the look of University College London, or I want to study in Manchester because I heard that's a great city, so I'm going to go to the University of Manchester. No, you're going to start with what you would like to study. Now, that might be intimidating because as you know, Laura, high school students do not always know what they want to get their bachelor's degree in. So, but that is a hurdle to overcome, but it is not an impossible hurdle for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that there are increasingly liberal arts programs, liberal arts and science programs, or just liberal arts programs at universities. So you have a little bit more choice, and you can change your degree a little bit when you are in university, so you're not 100% committed. But then there are also ways of perhaps combining 2 courses. So some universities offer what are called combined honors courses. And without getting too far into the details, I'll say that those courses would be, 2 subjects that kind of go together, and you can, a little bit like double majoring in a subject. And then the other thing is, because of this high school structure, that students have done this high school diploma, they're either doing what I described called A levels, 3 subjects, or they're doing maybe an IB diploma that's increasingly popular in the United Kingdom, but they have 3 higher level subjects, and then they have 3 standard level subjects. So there is a little bit of focus there as well. The reason why I'm mentioning these high school diplomas is to explain why then the bachelor's degrees are typically 3 years instead of 4 years. And that's because students already have a baseline knowledge in the subject that they're going to study. So if they want to study economics, for example, they might have been doing economics already in high school. But many subjects students don't have the opportunity to study in high school, and they can still study them in university. So psychology is a good example. A lot of high schools don't have psychology courses, but students can apply to psychology, and the requirements for that would be different. So don't worry if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't do an AP in this subject, and that's what I want to study at university in the UK. It's still possible. There are ways to do that. But those are kind of the biggest differences. I would say it would be the 3-year bachelor's degree. In Scottish universities, it's a little bit different also, in that many of the universities offer a 4-year bachelor's degree or a 4-year bachelor's and master's degree combined. And in those courses, there's also a little bit more flexibility because you can do a broad base of subjects in the first year. You don't necessarily have to be, you'll be applying for a particular course, but you're not absolutely committed to that for the entire 4 years. So that's where there's a little bit more flexibility. And there are also a couple of universities that offer you a little bit of flexibility. Most notably, I would say Cambridge University, if you're a candidate for that. And then also the option with liberal arts or liberal arts and sciences, which is also a little bit different than U.S. liberal arts, but maybe we don't have time to get into all of that today. So have I answered your question, or is there more?
That's great. I think the question I see coming up is, what if all of these European students are taking these A levels and they're taking A level exams, what is it that students need to be showing up with at the application? Do SATs? I know, a lot of AP exams, for instance, aren't even complete until May for many seniors. So what is expected of a student who is trying to apply to these schools?
That is a good question. So, and like we say in admissions, it depends. I really hate to say that, but I'm going to give you some specific examples. So a lot of universities will allow a combination of results. So they will ask students to apply with the current AP courses or the AP courses that they've already taken, and also an SAT or an ACT. If they don't have that piece, the SAT or ACT, some universities will also accept students applying simply with APs, but if they haven't completed them, the school will be asked to provide predicted grades. So one of the big differences in how you're admitted to universities in the UK is that you get a conditional offer based on the actual exam results. So if you're not getting your AP results until, let's say, July, you will have an offer from, let's say you apply and you get a couple of offers from universities and they say, okay, we'd love to have you, Laura, but you need to get a 4 in AP history and a 4 in AP English and a 3 in AP math, for example. That's probably not a great example, but let's just say that's what they're asking for. And then you'll have to wait until you have your results. Once your results are finalized, then the offer becomes unconditional and you are fully admitted. But it's best to have a backup plan, because if you don't, pass the exams at the right level, the offer may well be rescinded.
Are there schools that do not require testing, like in the United States, test optional, or it's more holistic admissions?
Yes. There are some, in particular in Ireland. So there will be universities that have a minimum GPA level. So it depends on the course. You may have a minimum GPA level of, let's say, 3.0 or 2.8, and they don't consider weighted GPAs. This is always unweighted GPAs. So they'll be asking for a certain GPA depending on which course you choose. So in some ways, this is very, very clear. It's easy for students to understand what the requirements are, because let's say you're looking at a course and you see, the requirement is 4.0, and I know I'm just not going to achieve that. Well, you really shouldn't apply, because they probably aren't going to consider you. It's very rare that students are considered if they don't meet the academic requirements. Occasionally they are, but it's quite rare.
Let's move into, I could piggyback on that all day, but let's move to literally how you apply. We have the Common App, we have the UCAS system for applying. I do know that there are some colleges from UK that are on the Common App, but let's talk about the UCAS in general and what is different about it, and kind of this idea, what are these colleges looking for? Obviously it depends, but is there a general what I've heard is it's much more numbers driven than it as we really care about your activities and we care that you've done service in the world. And can you just speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. And you're right about that. But I also wanted to make just one more comment about our last point. You were asking me, are there universities that don't require testing? There is another avenue for international students to enter UK universities without some standardized tests like AP, and that would be through doing an international foundation year diploma.
Right.
So that can be either at the university or through another organization, a college that offers that international foundation diploma. It's important to make sure that you find the one that aligns with the program that you want to do in your next stage, so at the bachelor's stage. So it adds that extra year, but the requirements are quite different. So they would not need standardized tests of any kind. A high school diploma would be sufficient for that type of entry. So, but to go back to the question about UCAS and how you actually apply. So UCAS is a centralized application system, and students apply to almost all universities in the UK through UCAS, not to Ireland, but just in the UK. So England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And you have a maximum of 5 program choices on UCAS. So unlike the Common App where you can apply to 20 universities, you can only apply to 5 programs. And the reason I say 5 programs is because you could apply to more than one program at one university. So let's say you like 2 programs at, London School of Economics. You can apply to 2 programs there and another program at 3 other universities. Typically, students don't do that, and I'll explain more about that when I'm talking about what their universities are looking for. So that's the first thing to know. You mentioned that some universities are on the Common App. Yes, this is true. Not all universities are on the Common App, but some are. And this is in an effort to make it a little bit easier for US students to apply to those universities. However, if you do apply through UCAS, you are not allowed to apply also on the Common App. It's a big deal. So you're expected to apply either through UCAS or to that small selection of universities that has made themselves available on the Common App. So the idea is that they really don't like students to game the system in that way, because they might be saying, okay, well, I'll apply to 5 on UCAS and then I'll apply to all these 3 on the Common App. So that's really not what you should be doing. You should either use the Common App schools that you like, or you should apply via UCAS to the 5 universities or 5 programs. So that application is really very simple when you compare it to the Common App. It's pretty much basic data about your nationality and where you live. That's very important for what is called your fee status, meaning how much you are going to pay for university. And then information about your school, what you're studying. So, what classes you're taking in school in your last year. And then any tests that you might be taking, like the ones we talked about before, AP, IB, or SAT or ACT. So you would put that in to UCAS. And lastly, two more elements. There is a personal statement written by the student, and we could do a whole webinar about the personal statement, but I'll cover just the main points about what is expected in the student's personal statement. And then there's a reference from your school. And I think the school reference is a really interesting piece of the application. There's only one reference. So what schools typically do, schools that are familiar with this, is the school counselor or the school principal is in charge of writing the reference. And they put a little bit of information about the school, because the UK universities do not look at school profiles. So I don't know if parents and students are familiar with school profiles. Laura, what do you think?
I think we could skip that, because that's a whole thing.
Okay.
But
so they're just trying to know the student, what is the student doing and what is, on offer at that school. Very, very brief about the school. And then how the student performs academically. So the counselor will assemble some information from teachers and write a reference based on what the teachers are saying about the students' performance in the classroom, how they interact in the classroom, how they approach challenges in the classroom, what kind of a student this is academically. And then back to the personal statement, which is the piece that the student is writing. It is a 4,000 character statement, not 4,000 word, 4,000 character statement. So we're talking in somewhere between 500 and 600 words. And the student writes about their interest in the subjects or subject that they are going to be studying at university. There is not a lot of room for all those great things that you have done for to develop your leadership skills, your athletic skills, and all the other things that you might be doing in high school. So you are really confined to, I say, no more than 15% of your statement is about what you might be doing outside of school. And really, it's only as it relates to how you might be a good student and a good fit for that course. So what we talk about when we're talking about UK universities, instead of extracurriculars, we're talking about supercurriculars. And supercurriculars are academically related activities. And that can really be anything. Reading is a big thing. You can talk about books that you've read outside of school, not for your school curriculum, that have interest you, that display your interest in the subject and that you can comment on in the statement. If you have an interview, you might be asked about what you write in the statement. So make sure you have written that book and some things that you can say about it. But also lots of other ways to explore your subject are acceptable supercurriculars. So that can be attending lectures, that can be listening to podcasts, that can be even, learning about what your subject is through an internship, or maybe you're interested in art history and you visited certain museums and galleries, you can talk about that. But as I said, there's not a lot of space devoted to that in the personal statement, but it can be, those are the kinds of things that they would be looking for that are related to the course. So that's what you're going to be looking for in terms of the personal statement. So mainly it's about your motivation to study the subject, what got you interested in the subject, what you've done at school to help you prepare for that subject. So that could be, let's say you want to study modern languages. Well, you've been taking Spanish and French in school. Maybe you traveled abroad, or maybe you read books in that language. Maybe you got a conversation partner and practiced the language. It can be many, many things. But the focus is really about, what skills you've developed that are going to help you to perform well in the course in the university. And what I tell students, this is a good tip, is to look really carefully at what the modules are for any degree that you're looking to apply for. So by modules, I mean, what are the actual classes that you're going to be required to take? And what does that look like? And how can you show that you understand what those classes are going to be like, and what the course is going to be like, and why you're a good candidate to study that.
That's great. I love that, because that's kind of what or at least our practice does, is the kind of fit to major, right? Like if you're going to major in something, then we want to show that you've done things in high school that show that you have interest and excitement and curiosity and intellectual vitality on those topics. So
absolutely, that's just right. And sometimes we even use that personal statement, an abbreviated version of that. If the student's applying to U.S. universities, we'll use that for the why major, or what major you're interested in, because it's a really, good example of that.
Can you speak to, I'm getting so excited about this, and I know so many students will get excited about this too, but let's talk selectivity.
Yes.
Can people, is it fair to say U.S. students are getting in now that there's more and more people applying? Are we seeing the same problem that we're seeing in the United States with selectivity? Tell me what you think.
Yeah, selectivity is definitely increased in the UK, and for all kinds of students. But That said, you probably, or maybe you don't know, or maybe your audience doesn't know that we really don't have as many international students in undergraduate programs in the U.S. as one might think. So it is different in the UK and Europe. There are more international students in the universities. So while there are fewer universities, there are more international undergrads in the universities. So maybe I'm getting off a little bit because I think we might want to talk a little bit about campus life and culture as well. So we'll leave that a little bit, but I'll just say about selectivity. Yes, I see the numbers going up every year in terms of what the requirements are. And so that means that they're getting more and more selective, but it really depends on the program and the university. So as I said before, we start with the programs, we look for where are these programs, where are the best programs in what you want to study. And then we start looking at the universities, and then we decide, well, okay, these are the geographic locations I like. This is the type of campus I want. And maybe there's even something that stands out to a student in high school about the different courses. Like one course might be economics with statistics and finance at one university, and they may not be able to find that same exact economics course in another university. So that's another way of selecting. But I would say a little bit more selective, but it's not anywhere near what we're talking about when we're talking about, for example, Ivy plus universities in the United States, where the application numbers dip below their single-digit application admission statistics. We don't have that so much in the UK universities. But the other reason why we don't have that is because it's very clear what the academic requirements are. So students are not encouraged to apply if they're way off what is expected.
Do these schools have regional rep? I mean, we call them regional reps, but admissions, people who are excited and willing to talk to them and kind of review, are you a candidate or not? Is that something students can do? Are people helpful, or is it more like read the application?
Yes. Well, one thing you should know is that the admissions officers it's a little bit different than in the US in terms of the way the admissions departments are structured. So admissions officers are responsive. They will answer your questions. They probably won't say, oh, yes, let's sit down and have a whole look at your background and profile and see if you're a good fit for this course. Because oftentimes admissions officers are recruitment officers. So they are encouraging students to apply. They are giving out a lot of information about the university. They're traveling to high schools. There are definitely regional reps. There are people who are based in the US representing these universities as well. There are people from the universities who will travel to US high schools and go to college fairs, etc. But those are not necessarily the people who are making the decision on your application. So quite often it is tutors from the academic department who are reading your application. So there's a big difference there. So those admissions officers and recruitment professionals, they'll be able to tell you what the requirements are, but they're not actually going to a committee meeting and rooting for you.
Are there interviews?
Yes, there are in some cases. There are some. Mainly interviews come in when students are applying to particular courses. So those would be medicine courses, very specific set of interviews that are evaluative, and they are a big part of the application process. But for most other courses, there are no interviews. There are exceptions sometimes to that rule. There are some courses that might interview applicants. And then Cambridge and Oxford universities do interview applicants, but you have to be selected for the interview after you've applied. And not all applicants get an interview. If you get the interview, If you don't get an interview, you're not going to be admitted. If you get the interview, then you still have to pass the interview in order to be admitted.
Can we go back and speak to the cost differences? I don't know if that's a rabbit hole, but what can a family expect from a cost perspective if they're get into, maybe not Cambridge, but another tiered school? Or
Right.
maybe it's Cambridge is the same. I don't know.
Well, the funny thing is that there is a range of prices. It is still less expensive than a U.S. university, even a state university, for the most part. But I would say right now, I was just looking at this to update it. One of the things that is a differential in pricing is the type of course you're taking. So if you're taking a bachelor's degree in one of the humanities, art history, or the social sciences, history, economics, political science, any of those, you're going to pay less than a student studying engineering, biology, chemistry, and you might be paying less as well than a student studying business. So it's a tiered system in that respect. So you'll have a pretty big range. But I would say an average university, the tuition fees are going to be somewhere between 15 and 20,000 pounds a year. So let's say that equates to, I got to do the quick math. If it's 20,000 pounds, it's easier. That's going to be about $26,000 a year or $27,000 a year. So that's just tuition.
Right.
Then room and board, we can be anywhere between 10 and 15,000 pounds a year, depending on where you are. If you're in a campus environment and you're living in a dorm on campus, you're going to be paying a lot less than if you're living in central London, and even if you have student housing, it's more expensive. But that's probably true anywhere. So that can be anywhere from, like I would say, as I said, maybe 10 to 15,000. And not all universities charge more if they're more selective. It really depends on the university. And I think the Scottish universities are probably the least expensive option.
How do families who've never really thought about studying in the UK, but are pretty determined to apply, where do they begin in choosing how to build a college list? I mean, obviously we need people like you, and that is very important, but let's just say not everybody is going to use someone like you or me.
Right.
What would be the best way? Where do they begin?
Well, the best resource for students is UCAS. That is the platform. It's UCAS and UCAS.com, UCAS. That is not just an application platform. There is a ton of information there for students. There are ways to search for universities based on your interests, based on your geographical areas, based on any number of filters. It's a little bit wonky. You have to kind of work with it a little bit. I very much think that it's kind of what's the expression I'm looking for? You need to just get in there and start looking around to use the filters effectively. They try to improve it every year, but it is a really, really good resource for finding the kinds of things that you want to study and finding out where you might fit in. Then you want to use the university websites as well, because UCAS is very accurate, but you want to, once you've got sort of a long list, you can use the university websites to figure out what exactly is going to be in the course and what you might, need to get into that class, to get into that university to study, whatever subject that you decide to study.
That's a huge tip. I thank you for that. Let's take that as a place to move to culture fit, differences in college experience, culture, living on campus, off campus. I've often heard through the grapevine through the years that yes, there's amazing college but there's amazing colleges, but there's issues with housing. So you might not get housing, or housing isn't guaranteed, or things like that. And I have no idea if that's true or not, but I'm curious about that.
Yes, that's a very good question. So there is housing on UK campuses, but as I mentioned before, if you're going to a university that's in the city, so let's think about London. If you're going to university, let's say Imperial College or London School of Economics, or if you're going to University of Westminster, there are going to be fewer accommodations for students, and they might be a train ride, not a train, but like a tube subway, or a subway or a bus ride away from campus. So those campuses don't necessarily have the housing that's right there on campus. But there are other fantastic, beautiful campuses on the outskirts of London, and then also in the other cities and regions of the UK where you have a much more campus-like structure. So students are for the most part, living on campus. So there are options there, and that's something to consider, whether you feel comfortable going to a university where you might have student housing, but it might not be right there next to your classes, or you really want that campus environment. And I find that students really kind of know that. And the best way is to go see it, but if you can't go see it, you can try to find out more by attending webinars. UK universities have done a lot more in terms of outreach in the last several years than they ever did before. So I would try to take part in that. And also, it's very simple to register your interest on UK university websites, and they'll start sending you emails, and that's a good way of learning a lot more about that. But back to the culture and the campus life, because there are a couple other points I'd like to make. If you feel like you're independent enough of a student, the UK is a good fit for you. Because as I started by saying, these are public institutions. They may not have all the resources that we are accustomed to on US campuses. And you might have heard the expression, if you're watching films or TV shows from the UK, oh, I read history at university. I read French at university, because students go there and they're expected to do a lot of work independently. They go to class, but you might have less class time than you think. And you can find out about that on the websites. You can see how many course hours there are per week. But you might be doing some large lectures as well as smaller classes, but you have to be independent, because it's the support. There is some support, but the support is not nearly as extensive as it is in US universities. So be ready for that. If you are independent enough, it could be a very good choice for you, but it is also, not a great choice if you really want to be asking your professor for an extension every week, because you're not going to get it.
Right.
So that's one thing I would say when you're thinking, oh, I've never done this. Why am I even thinking about it? Well, just know that you really need to be an independent student when you're at a UK or a European university. Now, one more thing I wanted to mention about UK, there are a couple of private institutions in the UK, and those are worth looking at as well. One of them is an American University in Richmond. It's just on the outskirts of London, very accessible, great place to go. They do bachelor's degrees that are definitely UK and US. They're certified university. But they're just a little bit different. So they have a little bit more support, and that can be true for students who need academic support as well. So Richmond is one, Regent's University is another. So there are a couple of those.
That's great. Actually, that's a question that I've been dying to ask, because one of the things I'm concerned about a little bit of my students who are like, yes, I really want to do this, and I really believe they're going to do it for the first year, but I'm not totally convinced it's going to work for 4 years. I just don't know, right? I have a hunch. What does that mean for transferring credits if they come back?
Oh, well, one thing is, I think it's a lot easier to transfer your credits from UK universities to US universities.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I see going the other way, it's a little bit less so. And I think it's because of the structure of the bachelor's degree. Because you're starting right in, you have to have, gotten to, you have to have gone through a certain number of courses, specific courses to get to the next semester and then the semester after that. So let's say you spend a year in a U.S. university and you want to transfer your credits and go to a European university. They kind of have to match up very specifically. Whereas in the U.S., there's a little bit more flexibility because you typically have to cover the courses in other disciplines. And so you might get the credits. They might not be major specific, but you'll get credits for the courses that you've taken.
So it's not to clarify, it's not a big red flag for you. If a student is like, I want to try it out for a year and then maybe I'll come back, you feel confident that at most schools, and it always depends, but that credits do transfer back and it's not like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
Okay, that's great.
You have to perform, you have to pass your exams and do your work, but yes, those credits will transfer.
We have 4 minutes left.
Ooh.
Which is crazy that 45 minutes is high. And most of my following knows I'm strict about 30 minutes, but with you, Jennifer, I just knew that wasn't going to be enough. But I do want to honor everybody's time. What else do we need to know? What are we missing? What's like top tips before you leave?
Oh, okay. I'm just looking at my notes because I made a few notes too, just to make sure that I covered everything. I think yeah, I think we covered just about everything that we can cover today. Oh, we didn't talk about, like, there are a couple of other things, like when you actually get your offers and what happens next. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a little bit of a process thing. So students, as I mentioned, this is really just for UK, but it can also be for other university systems. You apply with what you have and what might be your predicted grades or your high school GPA, and then you're given conditional offers. And let's say you applied to 2 universities in Ireland and 5 universities in the UK, because that's your limit. And in the UK, you will get, let's say you got 3 offers. Well, you have to choose a firm offer and an insurance offer. What does that mean? You have to choose your top choice and your second choice. And I advise students to pick their top choice university, whatever it is, obviously, whatever the offer is, and try to meet that offer. But you will automatically, if your offer is declined, let's say they're asking you for, I don't know, 600 on the SAT and 2 APs, 600 in English, let's say, and you don't make it, you then will automatically be transferred to your insurance choice university. And the reason I'm bringing this up, because this may sound like it's far in the future, because it is, because most students won't get that final decision until the spring. You should think carefully about where you're applying, because I just had a conversation with a student about that this morning. He wanted to change out one of his choices, and because he thought, well, it's easier to get into, but you only have 2 choices in the end. You don't have all 5 choices to make that decision. So you need to really kind of carefully think what the process looks like before you choose those before you actually choose where you're going to apply.
That's great. We have 1 minute left. I'm going to do a practical question. Visas. When should families be making sure that they have the proper paperwork for this?
Okay, really great question. You cannot apply for your visa until you receive the documentation from the university that says you have been admitted and you are enrolled in their course. And that does not come until after you get your firm offer, your unconditional offer from the university. So it does leave it until, depending on when your results come in, it can leave it until the last minute. So make sure you have a backup plan. You're either taking a gap year or you're doing a university in another country, and then you apply for your visa. Normally, if you've got that, what is called a CAS form at most universities, that's the certificate that you've been accepted to university. It's not a huge issue for U.S. citizens to get the visa, but as we know, summer is a very busy time for applying for visas. So as soon as you get it, then you go to your consulate and do the application process, and you will get support from the university. They will tell you about it, about how to do it, but that doesn't come until after you've got your unconditional offer. So it is a little bit of a mad rush in the summer. It's the same for European students going to the U.S. as well.
Okay. Jennifer, your expertise is invaluable, and I am so happy you're going to be part of our emerging team, sharing your expertise. And obviously, families who want to reach out to you directly can do that as well. And I hope you have a wonderful trip. You leave tonight for Geneva, right?
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much, Laura. I really look forward to meeting your students and anyone who wants to talk about this further.
Great. Thank you. Have a great trip.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.